We've made it to Egypt. That's right, a lifelong bucket list destination, Egypt. And we're going to show you over the next few days our unbelievable adventure. We go down a Nile River cruise. We go to the Great Pyramids of Giza. We see the unbelievable temples and all the things that Egypt has to offer, and we can't wait to show it all to you. But today we're going to start by boarding our Nile River cruise. We're going to give you a tour of it, kind of tell you what a Nile River cruise is like. Then we're going to tour the Karnak temple in Luxor and the Luxor temple at night at sunset.
Welcome to Living Phase 2.
Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Nancy, and we're empty nesters striving to live life to the fullest.
And we are living that full life, traveling our dream destinations around the world, and today we're touring Egypt.
We sure are, friends. Well, today, we've just taken our flight, and we didn't get in until it was early this morning, about 2 o'clock in the morning. We're at the Hilton, which is, I'm going to start right out here with a pro tip. Going through a tour company can really be an advantage because you can get some of the nicer hotels rather than if you're booking them yourself, because they're going to book in quantities and they've got deals with the hotels. So
well,
you can get
not only that, they have a wink and a handshake, and everyone kind of knows everybody. And I mean, we stayed, and you'll see this throughout this multi-day adventure here in Egypt, and you saw it in Jordan too. We've stayed at some of the most unbelievable 5-star hotels, and for what we paid for this entire adventure, that's incredible.
It really is. And this hotel was absolutely incredible. We got up, it was a little later in the morning, and had breakfast there. They had a beautiful buffet breakfast. It overlooked their infinity pool and the Nile River. So we had our first look at the Nile River in the daylight, and it was just something.
Yeah, I was, of course, arriving at 2 in the morning, we didn't see any of this. We pretty much collapsed after that long tour. And if you didn't see that, go back and take a look at our last video on the Wadi Rum Desert, because we really didn't get much sleep that last night. No. And then not getting until 2 in the morning, we were pretty tired. But so this was nice, being able to arrive in Egypt, have a nice hotel, and not have the tour company pick us up until about noon. So that worked out really well.
The guide met us, and then he took us right away to our Nile River boat, which is called the MS Premium. And we got on board, we got checked in, and it was time for us to take a little tour of our new home on the water. Well, what's a Nile River boat like? Well, first off, what's the difference between a boat and a ship?
Oh, well, when we were on our 9-month world cruise talking to the captain one time, I loved his definition. I thought this is the best one I've ever heard. You can put a boat on a ship, but you can't put a ship on a boat. And so, believe me, you could put this on the cruise ships we were on. This is a river boat. This is not a ship. So.
Well, let's start at deck 5. That's the top deck. Now, all of these river cruises, pretty much all the top decks are the same. And in fact, probably the entire boats are the same in every river cruise. But it's a sun deck. It's a sun deck with a pool and a lounge. There's chairs and a bar. So we would come up here and we'd sit and enjoy the sun. We had a little barbecue up here one day. They had tea up here for us one day. So it was a nice place for us to relax in between different events or excursions that we had.
Yep. And now the one thing about the pool, we are here in January, as we've mentioned before, so it's a really, really great time to be here because the weather's beautiful, the temperatures are great, the crowds aren't too much, but the pool is freezing cold. They don't heat it. So
get in the pool.
No, and I saw a couple of kids on our boat get in it once or twice, but yeah, we didn't have a hot tub on ours. I think some of the others may have had that, but yeah, that pool was not swimmable, at least in January. I imagine it'd feel good in August, but yeah.
So moving on down then to deck 4. Deck 4, there's rooms, staterooms. There's a lounge and a bar and a gym. Now the gym was very small. I think there were only 3 or 4 pieces of equipment there. And the bar and the lounge, we would go down there and we'd have a drink. They also also had one night a belly dancer and kind of a whirling dervish type dancer. They would do different.
They had a dance party
events,
one night in there.
Different events in the bar lounge area. Moving down to deck 3, this was our deck. This is where there were rooms. They had a couple of little shops. One of them sold jewelry, another one sold souvenirs. And we got a couple of things at the souvenir shop, which I thought were quite reasonable as far as their pricing goes. I got a shirt that says Nancy in the hieroglyphics and picked up a few things for the grandkids here that were pretty inexpensive.
Yeah, we talked to our guide about that shop, and what he said is, if you really, really haggle with the vendors on land, you can probably beat the prices on the ship. But the prices on the ship are, I guess what I'd say is a nice balance, right? And the guy on the ship negotiated a little bit, like if you bought more than one thing, like we bought 3 little stuffed camels for the grandkids. He negotiated a little bit, but pretty much if you don't want to haggle, don't want to go through it, he has a lot of the same souvenirs there, and you can just buy them and pay a reasonable price without the fight.
Well, my t-shirt that was embroidered that says Nancy on it was only $15. And I just ordered that the first day that they were open, and then they had it the last day for me to pick up, that they did the embroidery somewhere on land and then brought it back to the boat.
Yeah, I thought that was super reasonable.
That was cool. Yeah, and it's a cool souvenir to have too. All right, then moving on down, level 2, we've got the lobby. This is where you're going to enter into the boat itself. There's also some rooms here, and this is where you pass through. These boats line up, boat, 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 and they butt up against one another. So you literally walk through one boat, to the next boat, to the next boat, to the next boat. If yours is on the outside, you're going to be walking through multiple boats. And so it was kind of fun. I got to take some pictures of some of the other boats inside, or the inside lobby area of them. And so again, they're pretty much all about the same, but it was neat to see the different ones.
Well, what was the deepest we got? 6 or 8 boats, right?
6 or 7, yeah.
6 or 7 boats, yeah. And so you're walking, a long way. And then another thing to be aware of is don't count how many boats you're in when you're getting on and off, because you may go ashore, tour, come back, and they've actually rearranged your boats.
Yes.
So you might end up the first boat, and then you come back from your tour and you're the last boat. So just be aware they do move the boats around during the day in the order. So
know the name of your boat.
And know what your lobby looks like. And
and your guide will help you too if there's any question whatsoever. And our guide also said, just so you know, there's a lot of river boats. In fact, he said there's about 300 that are licensed to be on the Nile River, but there are about 150 that are actually operating on the Nile River, and we would see a lot of them, just lines and lines of them, and they're just kind of all going the same destinations back and forth.
Yeah, that was a surprise to me.
Yeah.
I thought we're going to be on the Nile River Cruise, and there might be a couple of boats out there. I never expected dozens and dozens of boats going up and down the Nile. And so just be prepared for that. You're going to see a lot of boats.
And then moving on down to deck 1. Deck 1 is the dining room. There's a bar. There's also, that's where the guides have their rooms. Probably some of the workers have their rooms here as well. But we would always go down to deck 1 for the dining. Well, this is the boat, but now let's go to our room and take a look here at our stateroom. It's on the deck 3, and it's a little larger than what we had on the World Cruise. And on the World Cruise, we were in a standard balcony room. And I think what we're in now is a standard room as well. And you have just a little more elbow room here too, but you've got a little desk area and closets and your bed and bathroom, and so it's relatively the same as a stateroom on the cruise ship.
I was surprised how spacious it was. Actually, we never felt cramped. We had plenty of room for our luggage. Being that we're on this trip for 18 days or something, we had a suitcase each and a carry-on each, and we didn't have any problems, having that luggage in the room.
No, we didn't. There's plenty of space. So also, just so you know, don't always expect to have a great room or a great view out of your room, because these boats are just butted up one next to the other. A lot of times you'll just be looking directly at another boat. And when we went through the locks, I looked directly at a lock. It must have been about 12 inches away from our window. So you're going to keep your blinds closed quite a bit of the time just for privacy, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, Nancy, how many people were on the ship with us?
Not
It was
many.
not crowded.
They said there were 43 passengers, and this riverboat holds 150. So it was really very quiet there, and we had a set table at the dining room that we would go to each time. They showed us this was our table, and yeah, that's how that was handled.
Well, and because there were so few people, we had a private table. Now, if it was 150 people, if it was fully packed, we'd have been sharing that table with 2 other people.
I think most likely, yes, we would have been.
But this goes to that theme. If you've been watching our videos here of our adventures in the Middle East and Jordan, there's nobody here. I mean,
There's
relatively
not.
speaking. Now, you'll see there's more people here than there were in Jordan, but still, relatively speaking, I mean, this ship's only a third full, and they're this boat, and it's really quite amazing, actually, right now. We're just going to keep telling you, if you've ever had a desire to go, now's the time to go.
Agreed.
You're going to see that in some of the things coming up here.
Agreed. Well, after we took a tour of the boat, it was time for lunch. So we went down to deck 1 and had lunch. And they give you a specific time. They kind of give you an itinerary of what's happening each day. And they tell you, to go to breakfast between this time and that time, the same way with lunch and dinner. And so it was lunchtime, and we went down and we had a nice buffet lunch. They have several options for you. Meat options, there's always a vegetarian, a fish option, lots of salad choices, and some really nice desserts as well, and plenty of fruit and vegetables too.
Well, after lunch, we headed up to the sun deck, really just kind of relaxed because our tour was not till 3 o'clock. So we relaxed, read a book, just enjoyed the view of the Nile there here in Luxor, Egypt, and waited for our guide to show up, which he did promptly show up at 3 o'clock.
Well, he was already on the boat because his room is here on deck 1. So the guides are also with us and are right with us on the boat as well.
Yeah, so it's probably a good time to tell you how this tour, so much like our adventures in Jordan, which hopefully you saw, but if they didn't, that's probably because they're not subscribed.
Well, they should. Friends, we thank you for subscribing to our channel. We appreciate it when you hit that like button. So thank you very much for following along with us.
Yeah, we thank you a lot for that. Well, like we were saying, this is how we arranged this tour. So we had a tour guide in Jordan. Now we have another tour guide who's met us here in Egypt, and he will be with us along with a driver the whole time we're here. Well, the driver will be with us once we get off the boat. But yeah, the guide goes right with us. We're the only 2 people that he's with. And we also, after we finish this entire segment of Middle East tour, we are going to give you a cost breakdown because it was quite, I think, amazingly affordable for what we did over 2 weeks here in the Middle East. So, yep, our guide's with us. He shows up at 3 o'clock. And the very first place we're going to go is the Temple of Karnak here in Luxor. And it was... what a way to start. It was quite spectacular.
So many hieroglyphics. It was just from so long ago. It's just amazing that this has been preserved as well as it has been.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, and again, you'll hear a theme of us saying some of this. I was really amazed how well preserved everything is. Now, they worked very hard on that. You go back even to the 1950s and 60s, this temple was actually buried in sand, up to almost the tops of the walls and everything. They had to go through and actually dig all this out and start preserving it to have it be a destination, a landmark.
Well, and some of the difference now between these temples is these are now carved out of granite, whereas what we've seen in the past, what we saw at Petra, was sandstone that erodes very easily, and so this granite is much longer lasting.
Yeah, on a lot of the facing, the sculpture, some of the blocks, so it has lasted, especially things like the obelisks and that are carved out of granite. That does, as you said, last a lot longer. The Temple of Karnak is dedicated to the god Amun-Ra. He's represented by a man with a goat's head, or a goat. You'll see goat's heads, and that's
Ram,
what.
yeah.
And all these different pharaohs over many generations kept adding to this temple and adding to this temple. So the temple complex of Karnak is huge. It's just stunning when you look at the scope and scale of it, but also a lot of the detail that you see.
Right, and they added to it, these pharaohs would add to it to please the god Amun-Ra for afterlife, that they wanted to go into the afterlife and be with him, and to do that they needed to keep adding on to the temples. Now, we're not going to go deep into Egyptian history, although our guides were excellent in describing and letting us know all of the history here. We're just going to give you our novice tourist impressions of what we got to see.
Yeah, and in fact, our guide was really good about, he gauged, okay, how much history do you want? How much do you just want to see? What do you want? So he would talk to us, and I'm kind of a history geek, so I loved getting into some of the details. I thought he did a good job of balancing it and giving us just enough. I thought of what we wanted. Now, some other people may want to get even deeper, which he could do that. Some people may want to be, I just want to see the pretty sculptures and hieroglyphs and get out of here. So work with your guide to make sure he's giving you what you want out of your tour. They're there for you, and so that's important.
I think he could tell by the questions you were asking and how much in depth he needed to go.
Right. But let's talk a little bit about the Karnak Temple. It was started around 1800 BC, and it's got this beautiful obelisk out front. It's got a line of sphinxes out front that are in the first chamber on the inside. It's interesting. I mentioned earlier that this was all buried in sand. You can actually see some graffiti in French way up, like 50 feet up on the wall. That's where the sand line was, where they walked into this temple when the French came in and first saw this. And of course, unfortunately, many people still today, they carved their names and said, okay, this is when we were here. But that lets you know also where the sand line was. We went through the towers and these rows of columns. I thought it was incredible walking through those rows of columns, and the color that is still there from 3,000 years ago.
Amazing.
The color is still so vibrant, and we talked to our guide about that. Well, what did they use for pigments? And he talked about the different plants and different things, and he said that in some of it, we're still not sure today, some of the formulations and ingredients they use to have this color actually still be preserved and so vibrant today. One of the carvings you can see is where, the Pharaoh's conquest of Damascus. We walked all through these chambers all the way to what's called the Holy of Holies, which is, same as, in Judaism, they have the Holy of Holies. It's the center, worship or central temple area where they would have like a little statue of the god that temple is dedicated to. So we could go in there and see that. As you go to each of these temples, what you'll find is most of them have a Holy of Holies or a central temple area. That's always the busiest part. You'll see a line of people trying to go in there, and we'll kind of give you a hint that once you get in there, most of the time there's nothing in there. There might be a little, an obelisk or something made of basalt, or there might be a little table in there. But obviously, most of that's been looted or taken out. So you're going to get in there. The one nice thing you're going to see in these Holy of Holy areas is usually some quite spectacular hieroglyphics, paintings, drawings on the walls. That's really what you're going in there to see. Well, as we're walking around, our guide showed us one of the things we're going to see in almost every temple, everything you're going to see in Egypt, and that's cartouches. You may have heard that word. Really what that is, that's the hieroglyphic symbol for the name of the pharaoh, or someone's name is a cartouche. You even got that shirt with your cartouche on it for Nancy. And the pharaohs always have two cartouches. They'll have their name, their original birth name, and they'll have their pharaoh name. And so they will have each of those, and we saw many, many of those cartouches. And in fact, some of the walls will list all these different pharaohs and when they ruled, and that's how they understood a lot of the lineage and timelines here in Egypt. So I thought that was quite fascinating. In fact, you'll see some where the cartouches are scratched off, and one pharaoh didn't like the pharaoh before him and try to erase him from history and things like that. So you'll hear us talk about cartouches a lot as we go through here.
Well, as we continued walking around, someone called out our name, and Jillian, we want to say hi to you.
Hi, how you doing, Jillian?
You ran across it. You and your husband said hello to us, and we appreciate you following along. Jillian's husband took the picture of us here, but they're from England. And friends, we always love to say hello to you. So thank you when you see us out in the wild and you say hello to us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Well, by now we've walked through the entire main part of the complex, and our guide's given us all the history, showed us the big things to see, you know, kind of gave us the flow of history and all this. And then this is something that our guide here in Egypt did that I just loved. He said, okay, now you're on your own. And of course, he wouldn't have done this if we weren't comfortable with it. But, you know, we had discussed this. We like time to just wander on our own and explore and discover things ourselves. So he divides that time up to where he gives us the overview. And then he says, okay, well, just, you know, when do we want to meet back, etc. Now, in this case, we had to get over to Luxor for sunset. So we did have a limited amount of time here at Karnak. But he gave us half hour, 45 minutes and said, okay, just wander around. And then when you come back, if you have any questions, let me know. So we started just wandering around the temple complex, and this is where we ran into probably our first scam in Egypt.
Right. Well, and it's people that are actually working at these temples. It's the security guards that are there, and they kind of will block away for you. They'll be like, oh, let me show you where I can get a great picture of you. This is a great picture. You know, let me see your camera. I'll take the picture. But then they want a tip. That's really what they're wanting is, or they will be blocking the view for you, but they'll say, oh, well, you can get a good picture behind me, you know, but they want the tip for you to pass.
Right.
So
this is where the
just
term
unfortunate.
This is where the term bakshish comes in. Bakshish is the Egyptian or Arabic term for a tip or for giving some money, you know, in exchange for something. And I guess I'm stretching it a little to call it a scam. I think it's a scam where they're actually having they're blocking off an area that's completely open to tourists, but they're making it look like it's blocked off. And then they'll be like, oh, you know, you want to come back here, little tip, you know. This is where it took me a while to get used to this in Egypt. Just carry around some small denomination currency in Egypt, some ones from the US dollars, and just get used that you're going to tip people. And so, you know what, don't be afraid of it. And honestly, if you have $1, they will actually show you some great areas. It's just that I had a hard time, you know, walking around trying to get over this fact that I've got to pay you to see something that I shouldn't have to.
We didn't know that going in.
Right.
And maybe if we would have been prepared that this is the way their culture is, we would have expected that, and then it wouldn't have maybe bothered us like it did.
Right, because it felt like we were getting scammed, and we had our guard up and all this, when really it's like, okay, this is just how it is. You tip them $1, you know, and they will, it's at all the different temple complexes. I mean, it's even down in, we're going to show you later, down in the tombs where they've got their workers down there, and they're all wanting to show you, you know, they'll say, oh, I'll show you this, but just realize you need to give them like $1 when they're done showing you that. It's not
right.
gratis.
So be prepared.
Just be prepared for that, and get your mindset that you will be tipping a lot during your time here in Egypt. Well, as we continue walking around, we made it to the Grand Pool of the Temple of Karnak. This is a very, very famous spot. There's a lot of legends and things about the Grand Pool. People will say it's somehow magical, like it's, you know, it's magically never out of water, and, you know, it's never been filled, but it keeps, you know, refilling itself and things. I mean, we can't vouch for any of that. All we know that it is beautiful. It's an amazing historic site. It's been here for thousands of years, and it's a pool. It's a pool of water that was used for various things, for ceremonies, for water, for everything here at the temple. And so don't miss making your way over to the Grand Pool here at the Temple of Karnak. Well, then we continued just wandering around and enjoying our time here at the Temple of Karnak. Nancy even got to walk like an Egyptian a little bit. We had to do it. We had to do it.
Yeah, messing around.
You know, we took some different pictures. There's some, again, if you walk away from the main areas, because that's where the big tour groups are going to go, the, you know, the flag carriers, right? They're going to hit this, this, and this, and then they're going to get out and get to the next site. Take some time to just wander, and you're going to find some beautiful areas. As an example, we went back to one of the original or different Holy of Holy areas, because they moved around depending on as the pharaohs updated things. This was one of those cases where we had to kind of make our way around one of the security guys who was looking for a tip to let us in there. but it was fully open to anybody, you know, that you can just go in there. Got a couple pictures in there. But then we started heading back up to the front. We walked to that main area, that main courtyard. There's this, I think the line of sphinxes there. I mean, it's so just typical Egypt. It's what you think of. But here's where having a good guide really expands your knowledge. You know, everyone talks about, well, how'd they build the temple? Was it aliens? Did they have any gravity technology? No, they had simple wheels, logs, and mud ramps. And here's where it's really amazing. The Egyptians were building, as we said, continuously building this temple. They actually had one of the mud ramps still in place here in this main courtyard as they were building one of these front walls. Well, then the Greeks invaded, and so the Egyptians just abandoned this building. So this mud ramp is still here, showing how they made their way up to the top to put the blocks and stones in place. That's how they built a lot of the temples, the pyramids,
cool.
things like that. So here's evidence where they abandoned a project but left the building materials in place. Again, having a good guide. I'd have just looked and said, oh, it's a big pile of mud or dirt or whatever. That's how they were doing it. So, you know, you can see here exactly how they built these different temples and things.
Well, we left the Karnak temple. We're working our way to the Luxor temple by sunset. Now, these are only 3 kilometers away. In fact, they had been connected by the avenue of the Sphinxes, or Sphinx? Sphinxes?
Sphinxides?
I'm not sure.
Sphinxes,
But anyway,
yeah.
you can still see a number of them out front here of the Luxor temple. You can also see a boat that they used to carry statues along the Nile when they would have festivals or celebrations or
Ceremonies,
worshiping the gods. Yes, so you can see a replica of that here. Well, as you can see, friends, there are very few people here. It is not crowded. We're able to get some great pictures. You can get some nice angles of all the Sphinx down the row here. So, again, it's a great time to come and visit.
Yeah, nobody's here.
Yes. But as we continued up to the front, we could see now the tallest obelisk here in Egypt. Now, it has a sister obelisk in France, in Paris, France. It was actually traded for a clock here in Egypt. So Egypt has the clock, they've got the obelisk in Paris, and the clock here is broken, and it's always been broken. So I don't know how fair of a trade that really was, that they got a broken clock for a amazing obelisk.
Yeah, yeah, this is really quite incredible when you think about, you know, because we've been to Paris and we've seen that obelisk, and then we're standing here. This is the pedestal it was on. You know, you've got the one on one side and the one missing on the other, and you're thinking, oh, that's the one I saw in Paris. Tying all that together it's just awe-inspiring.
It is.
You know?
Well, we walked through the center opening of the temple, and one of the first things we could see was a mosque. Now, this mosque is actually an active mosque. In fact, they were worshiping there as we were visiting, but it was up 50 feet high, and that's because the sand had been up that high, just kind of the same as we had mentioned before, and so that's where then they built the mosque on top of the sand, but all of these ruins were down below. So they've uncovered all these ruins, but the mosque still stays active up above.
Yeah, they had a lot of debate. Do they remove the mosque from the Temple of Luxor and move it somewhere else? Do they leave it? And in the end, they decided, well, it was kind of history too. They had built this mosque, and here you can see where the sand line is. There's so much story to it that they decided just to leave it as an active mosque and to leave it at that level where you have to kind of come in the back side and go up the 50 feet. I thought it was quite fascinating.
It was very cool.
Well, as we continued on past the mosque, we saw some incredible carvings of Ramses II. You need to really look at all your different nooks and crannies, because right behind that is one of the most amazing carvings of a woman. You can see the detail that they put into each of these, how the carvings were thousands of years ago when they initially built these. Well, as we continued on, we made it to the Holy of Holies of this particular temple, and this is where it was really neat. This was actually built by Alexander the Great, so this was a fairly recent, it's only a few thousand years old, but after Alexander had conquered Egypt, he wanted to portray himself as Egyptian. He didn't try to change their culture, so what he did is he put himself in here, and you can actually see pictures or hieroglyphs or drawings or carvings, of Alexander the Great dressed as an Egyptian, trying to show that he was part of their culture so they would accept him as their leader. Well, we left the Holy of Holies and looked at, I mean, this courtyard here at night and how it's lit of the Temple of Luxor is just, your mouth just hangs open.
Well, it's really nice that they have it open at night. The columns are backlit, and this is a beautiful time to see this temple.
Yeah, seeing it at sunset, at dusk, at night is really a different way to see these temples. And like you said, I'm glad they have it that way. In fact, you can see the columns, again, having a good guide pointing out to us, the columns come up and they're actually papyrus plants. So they, you'll see some that are like river lilies, some are papyrus plants that were very important to the Egyptians. They modeled their columns after, and they're just gorgeous, just really spectacular. Well, once again, our guide gave us some time just to wander around, take pictures. There's one area that we did go and take a picture where the Romans, because we've talked about this as Egyptian, Greek, and now Roman. They took over an area and put frescoes up, and this is one of the few places you can still see Roman frescoes. They tried to convert it to Roman,
right,
from the Egyptian, so that was really interesting. But we just wandered, took pictures, just enjoyed ourselves, but we had to make it back for our guide. It's getting late, and we got to get back to our boat and have some dinner.
So we went back to the boat and had a nice buffet dinner again, and we need to go to bed early tonight because tomorrow we've got to get up about 4 in the morning. We've got a beautiful hot air balloon ride.
Yeah, we do. So don't miss our next video on here. Like we said, be sure to subscribe and turn on those notifications. That's going to help you know when these videos come out. But we're going to see the Valley of the Kings. We're going to see the Valley of the Queens and the Temple of Hatshepsut. We're going to watch the riverboats on the Nile. We're going to see some Nile River shopping as they're throwing clothes up at us from little boats coming along ours. It's a great time, so you're not going to want to miss the next video.
All right, friends, thanks so much for watching. We will see you very soon. Have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.